comrades. This is the final part of Maurice Cornforth's Materialism and the Dialectical Method. This is chapter 11, the only chapter remaining, so this is going to be a much shorter video, and we will go ahead and get started. So chapter 11, A Scientific World Outlook, Science and Materialism. Dialectical materialism, the philosophy adopted by Marxist parties, is a truly scientific world outlook, for it is based on considering things as they are without arbitrary perceived assumptions, idealist fantasies. It insists that our conceptions of things must be based on actual investigation and experience, and must be constantly tested and retested in the light of practice and further experience. Indeed, dialectical materialism means understanding things just as they are, materialism, in their actual interconnection and movement, dialectics. The same cannot be said about other philosophies. They all make arbitrary assumptions of one kind or another and try to erect a system on the basis of those assumptions. But such assumptions are arbitrary only in appearance. In fact, they express the various prejudices and illusions of definite classes. Dialectical materialism is in no sense a philosophy above science. Others have set philosophy above science in the sense that they have thought they could discover what the world was like just by thinking about it, without relying on the data of the sciences, on practice and experience. And then, from this lofty standpoint, they have tried to dictate to the scientists to tell them where they were wrong, what their discoveries really meant, and so on. But Marxism makes an end of the old philosophy which claimed to stand above science and to explain the world as the whole. Modern materialism no longer needs any philosophy standing above the sciences, wrote Engels in Anti-Düring. As soon as each separate science is required to get clarity as to its position in the great totality of things, and of our knowledge of things, a special science dealing with this totality is superfluous. Dialectical materialism, he further wrote, is in fact no longer a philosophy, but a simple conception of the world which has to establish its validity and be applied not in a science of sciences standing apart, but within the positive sciences. Philosophy is therefore both abolished and preserved, abolished as regards its forms, and preserved as regards its real content. Our picture of the world about us, of nature, of natural objects and processes, their interconnections and laws of motion, is not to be derived from philosophical speculation, but from the investigations of the natural sciences. The scientific picture of the world and its development is not complete and never will be. But it has advanced far enough for us to realize that philosophical speculation is superfluous, and we should refuse to fill in gaps in scientific knowledge by speculation. The growing picture of the world which natural science unfolds is a materialist picture, despite the many efforts of philosophers to make out the contrary. For step by step, as science advances, it shows how the rich variety of things and processes and changes to be found in the real world can be explained and understood in terms of material causes, without bringing in God or spirit or any supernatural agency. Every advance of science is an advance of materialism against idealism, a conquest for materialism. Although when driven out of one position, idealism has always taken up another position and manifested itself again in new forms, so that in the past the sciences have never been consistently materialist. For every advance of science means showing the order and development of the material world from the material world itself. Science and socialism. The scientific character of Marxism is manifested especially in this, that it makes socialism into a science. We do not base our socialism, as the utopians did, on a conception of abstract human nature. The utopians worked out schemes for an ideal society, but could not show how to achieve socialism in practice. Marxism made socialism into a science by basing it on an analysis of the actual movement of history, of the economic law of motion of capitalist society in particular, thus showing how socialism arises as the necessary next stage in the evolution of society, and how it can come about only by the waging of the working class struggle, through the defeat of the capitalist class and the institution of the dictatorship of the proletariat. Thus, Marxism treats man himself, society, and history scientifically. Socialism, since it has become a science, demands that it be pursued as a science, wrote Engels in his prefatory note to Peasant War in Germany. That is, that it be studied. The task will be to spread with increased zeal among the masses of the workers the ever more clarified understanding thus acquired, to knit together ever more firmly the organization both of the party and of the trade unions. Scientific study of society shows that human history develops from stage to stage according to definite laws. Men themselves are the active force in this development. By understanding the laws of development of society, therefore, we can guide our own struggles and create our own socialist future. Thus, scientific socialism is the greatest and most important of all the sciences. The practitioners of the natural sciences have been getting worried because they feel that governments do not know how to put their discoveries to proper use. They have good cause to worry about this. Science is discovering the secrets of nuclear energy, for example, but its discoveries are being used to create weapons of destruction. Many people are even coming to believe that it would be better if we had no science, since its discoveries open up such terrifying possibilities of disaster. How can we ensure that the discoveries of science are put to proper use for the benefit of mankind? It is scientific socialism alone which answers this problem. It teaches us what are the forces which make history and thereby shows us how we can make our own history today, change society, and determine our own future. It teaches us, therefore, how to develop the sciences in the service of mankind, how to carry them forward in today's crisis. Physics can teach us how to release nuclear energy. It cannot teach us how to control the social use of that energy. For this, there is required not the science of the atom, but the science of society. Conclusions. We have now briefly surveyed the principal features of the Marxist materialist conception of the world and of the Marxist dialectical method. What conclusions can we draw at this stage? 1. The world outlook of dialectical materialism is a consistent and reasoned outlook, which derives its strength from the fact that it arises directly from the attempt to solve the outstanding problems of our time. The epoch of capitalism is an epoch of stormy development in society. It is marked by revolutionary advances of the forces of production and of scientific discovery, and by consequent and uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions. This sets one theoretical task above all, and that is to arrive at an adequate conception of the laws of change and development in nature and society. To this theoretical task, dialectical materialism addresses itself. 2. This is not the task of working out a philosophical system in the old sense. What is required is not any system of ideas spun out of the heads of philosophers, which we can then admire and contemplate as a system of absolute truth. Capitalist society is a society rent with contradictions, and the more it has developed, the more menacing and intolerable for the working people have the consequences of these contradictions become. The new powers of production are not utilized for the benefit of society as a whole, but for the profit of an exploiting minority. Instead of leading to universal plenty, the growth of the powers of production leads to recurrent economic crises, to unemployment, to poverty, and to hideously destructive wars. Therefore, the philosophical problem of arriving at a true conception of the laws of change and development in nature and society becomes, for the working people, a practical political problem of finding how to change society so that the vast new forces of production can be used in the service of humanity. For the first time in history, the possibility of a full and rich life for everyone exists. The task is to find how to make that possibility a reality. It is to the solution of this practical task that the theory of dialectical materialism is devoted. 3. Addressing itself to this task, dialectical materialism is and can only be a partisan philosophy, the philosophy of a party, namely of the party of the working class, whose object is to lead the millions of working people to the socialist revolution and the building of communist society. 4. Dialectical materialism cannot but stand out in sharp contrast to the various contemporary schools of bourgeois philosophy. What have these various schools of philosophy to offer at the present time? Systems and arguments by the bucketful, most of them neither original nor cogent, if one takes the trouble to analyze them closely. But no solution to the problems pressing upon the people of the capitalist countries and the colonies. How to end poverty, how to end war, how to utilize production for the benefit of all, how to end the oppression of one nation by another, how to end the exploitation of man by men, how to establish the brotherhood of men. These are our problems. We must judge philosophies by whether or not they show how to solve them. By that criterion, the philosophical schools of capitalism must one and all be judged, weighed in the balance, and found wanting. The prevailing bourgeois philosophies, with all their differences, have in common a retreat from the great positive ideas which inspired progressive movements in the past. True, there remain within the ranks of bourgeois philosophy those who continue, according to their lights, trying to preserve and carry forward some of these positive ideas. For they are ideas which cannot by any manner of means be extinguished. But the prevailing philosophies emphasize men's helplessness and limitations. They speak of a mysterious universe, and they counsel either trust in God or else hopeless resignation to fate or blind chance. Why is this? It is because all these philosophies are rooted in acceptance of capitalism and cannot see beyond capitalism. From start to finish, they reflect the insoluble crisis of the capitalist world. 5. Dialectical materialism asks to be judged and will be judged by whether it serves as an effective instrument to show the way out of capitalist crisis and war, to show the way for the working people to win and wield political power, to show the way to build a socialist society in which there is no more exploitation of man by man and in which men win increasing mastery over nature. Dialectical materialism is a philosophy of practice, indissolubly united with the practice of the struggle for socialism. It is the philosophy born out of the great movement of our times, the movement of the people who labor, who create all the good things of life and feed and clothe the world, to rise at last to their full stature. It is wholly, entirely dedicated to the service of that movement. This is the source of all its teachings, and in that service its conclusions are continually tried, tested, and developed. Without such a philosophy, the movement cannot achieve consciousness of itself and of its tasks, cannot achieve unity, cannot win its battles. Since the greatest task facing us is that of ending capitalist society and building socialism, it follows that the chief problem to which dialectical materialism addresses itself, and on the solution of which the whole philosophy of dialectical materialism turns, is the problem of understanding the forces of development of society. The chief problem is to reach such an understanding of society, of men's social activity, and of the development of human consciousness, as will show us how to achieve and build the new socialist society and the new socialist consciousness. The materialist conception and dialectical method with which we have been concerned in this volume are applied to this task in the materialist conception of history. And that is that. There is a reading list here. So the following are the principal works by Marx, Engels, and Lenin setting forth general principles of the philosophy of dialectical materialism. The 3 marked with an asterisk are the best for beginners. So Marx and Engels, The German Ideology, Part 1. Engels, Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, fantastic book. Ludwig Feuerbach, Anti-Düring, The Dialectics of Nature. And Lenin has The Teachings of Karl Marx, Materialism and Imperial Criticism in Philosophical Notebooks. So that is Maurice Cornforth's Materialism and the Dialectical Method. Thank you for listening if you've been here from the very beginning. I'm sorry for such the dramatically slow rollout. It's much slower than I intended. I'm currently going through school again, so a lot of that is just fatigue between working a full-time job, going to school full-time, and then just being burnt out and wanting to take time for myself. But I'm going to hopefully do more. One of my New Year's resolutions is to get more content out on this channel rather than just my TikTok, because I think TikTok is going a little bit south. My last video only had 85 views on it. When I at least consistently get 500-ish, and then even before we found out Oracle bought it, I was getting thousands of views. So definitely some suppression of leftist views. Might just be because I'm saying words in the text that are currently frowned upon in social media algorithms. Whatever. But I do plan to continue reading Maurice Cornforth's. It was brought to my attention that Materialism and the Dialectical Method is just the first book of a 3-book series by Maurice Cornforth. So I've really liked his writing. I think I'm going to continue with that, and I'll read the next one. Hopefully here in the next couple of weeks I'll get it started, and hopefully don't take 7 months to release the entire book. Really, this should have only taken... But there are 6 videos. Ideally, if I pump out one a week, it should have only taken 2 months or a month and a half at that. So New Year's resolution, put out videos more often. maybe some better critiques, actually have that planned out than just free flowing like I am right now. But if there are books that you would like to see read in the future, please let me know. Most of these books are, like I said in another comment, free at, I believe it's marxist.org. It's an online database with almost anything you can think of when it pertains to leftist writing, as well as I am no stranger, as you can see, to just buying books. That's just a small sample I know in some of my other videos. Upstairs, I'm buying my bookcase. I have one full bookcase of philosophy, not necessarily just Marxist thought, but just philosophy in general. So let me know what you'd like me to read. As long as it's not bound by copyright laws, I will read it and give my thoughts on it. Like I said, much more constructed, not just free flowing like this. I hope you like this series, and I hope you continue to support me. Thank you.